You were never taught how to build wealth. You were trained how to obey, how to wait, how to ask. And worst of all, you were trained to believe that asking for permission was virtuous. But there's the truth they don't want you to see. The system was never broken. It was built this way. Designed to reward obedience and punish initiative unless that initiative serves them. You think you're failing because you're not smart enough or talented enough. No, you're failing because you were given a script. And Machiavelli would tell you those who follow scripts written by others rarely write their own destiny. Look at how early it begins. From the first time you raise your hand to speak in a classroom, you're conditioned to wait your turn, to speak only when spoken to sit in neat rows, take instructions, memorize answers someone else decided were correct, and then regurgitate them on command. And what do they call this? Education. But Machiavelli wouldn't call it that. He'd call it indoctrination through routine, a quiet method of control. The more predictable you are, the less dangerous you are. The more well-behaved you become, the more power they hold over you. They train you to fear mistakes, to see failure as shame, not feedback. And that's no accident. If you feared nothing but failure itself, you'd experiment. You'd adapt. You'd take risks. You'd eventually stumble into power. But instead, they wired your psychology to associate risk with loss, to associate discomfort with failure. That way, they never need to stop you. You'll stop yourself. And the people who don't stop, they're labeled as lucky, gifted, or exceptional. Because if they admitted anyone could escape the trap, the illusion collapses. So they romanticize the exception and erase the pattern. Here's the trap Machiavelli would expose with surgical precision. They don't want you to think in terms of leverage. They want you to think in terms of labor. That the only way to get more is to work more. But look around. Do the people at the top work more? Or do they own more, control more, manipulate better? They don't lift bricks. They lift influence. They don't clock in. They design clocks. You were trained to be an employee, not an owner. To be obedient, not sovereign. The cruelest trick is this. They let you believe you're free. You can choose your career. You can choose your hobbies. You can even choose your brand of struggle. But the walls of the maze remain invisible because they taught you to worship the maze, to love the grind, to chase promotions inside systems that were never built to make you free, only comfortable enough not to revolt. And when you finally ask, why am I still stuck? They feed you moral platitudes, be grateful. Good things take time. Work hard and stay humble. But none of these build power. None of these shift your position on the board. In fact, humility when applied incorrectly is a leash disguised as virtue. So how do you break out? First, Machiavelli would say you must unlearn obedience. And that doesn't mean chaos. It means strategic disobedience. It means recognizing the invisible laws that were never voted on, never questioned, but always enforced. Laws like you must always have a job. You must play it safe. You must avoid judgment. All of these are artificial boundaries set to keep you dependent. He would tell you, if your enemy trains your mind, you'll never defeat him. You'll think his goals are your own. Second, understand the power of perception. Wealth isn't just material, it's psychological. Who do you believe deserves it? Who do you unconsciously assume should have more? Most people don't even realize they believe wealth belongs to others. To those with better families, better accents, better resumes. So they self-select out of power. They justify poverty by painting it as noble or worse, permanent. Machiavelli knew the poor man who believes he belongs there is far more controllable than the poor man who knows he doesn't. Next, reject the idea of fairness as a guiding principle because fairness in their game is always weaponized. You'll work harder to deserve more, but they never reward based on merit. They reward based on strategy, on perception, on loyalty. You keep showing up earlier, working harder, being a team player, and they give the promotion to someone who understands influence, not effort. And you tell yourself it's because you're not ready yet. No, you're just not ruthless enough. Yet this is why Machiavelli would never advise you to be nice when navigating systems built on dominance. He'd advise you to be calculating. Not cruel for the sake of it, but exact. Merciless with your boundaries. Silent about your goals, patient but never passive. They trained you to chase income, but not wealth. And here's the difference. Income is what you get paid. Wealth is what you control. Income is traded for time. Wealth buys back your time. But they didn't teach you how to build systems. How to think in terms of cash flow, equity, leverage, distribution. You were taught to fill arrow, not to design one. And yet the moment you begin to think differently, to speak differently, to want more, you'll notice the resistance. Subtle at first, people will call you arrogant, delusional, impatient. Why? Because your escape threatens their comfort. Your refusal to play the role you were assigned exposes the lie they've accepted. That's why they try to shame you back into place. But this is where you must become cold, calm, focused, because the system is not held up by the powerful. It's held up by the obedient, the tired, the well-meaning, the ones who think ambition is selfish. But you don't need to burn down the system to escape it. You need to see it clearly, and then make it irrelevant. That's the most Machiavellian move of all. Not rebellion, but redirection. Quietly walking off the stage they cast you on and building your own. Not yelling, not explaining, just disappearing from their script and reappearing on your own terms. And let's be honest, they'll never see you coming because they never trained you to be a threat. They trained you to be predictable, which is exactly why when you stop following the pattern, they panic. They panic because you become unmanageable. The moment you stop reacting the way they expect, they lose their grip. Your silence becomes suspicious. Your confidence intimidating. Your refusal to explain yourself unforgivable. But that's exactly what Machiavelli understood. When power shifts, it doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just stops obeying. Think about it. If they can't predict you, they can't control you. That's why the system depends so heavily on routine. Wake up, commute, work, consume, sleep, repeat, break the loop, and suddenly you're dangerous. Not because you're violent, but because you're no longer playing the game they designed for you to lose. Now let's get brutally specific. You were trained to value effort over outcome. They told you that hard work is everything. But if that were true, the hardest working people would be the richest, and they're not. In fact, often they're the most exhausted, the most disposable. Because in their world, labor is cheap, but power is expensive. And they made sure you were only taught one of those. They taught you how to sell your time. Not how to multiply it, not how to invest it, not how to own systems that pay you whether you show up or not. Why? Because time owners can't be controlled. And they need you busy, not productive, busy. There's a difference. Productivity builds leverage. Business just burns hours, and they applaud you for it. Wow. You're always working. They call you dedicated, but what they mean is predictable, obedient, too tired, to revolt, and worse, proud of it. You post about your hustle, your grind, your 80-hour weeks. You brag about burnout like it's a badge of honor. But Machiavelli would see through it in an instant. He'd call it what it is, glorified servitude. This is where the shift begins. You have to unlearn pride in labor and replace it with pride in strategy. You weren't born to grind. You were born to calculate, to maneuver, to dominate, not just survive. You were trained to think like a soldier. It's time to think like a general. So ask yourself this: where is your leverage? Where are your unfair advantages? Because if you're trying to and fair, you're already losing. Power isn't handed out to the most deserving. It's taken by the most prepared, the most perceptive, the most shameless in their willingness to take a different path. And let's talk about that path. Because they don't just discourage you from building wealth, they flood you with distractions, cheap dopamine, fake urgency, manufactured status symbols that drain your pockets and fill theirs. Why do you think they push you to upgrade your phone every year, but never your financial IQ? Why is fashion a conversation, but ownership is taboo? They want you high on consumption and low on clarity. Because clarity leads to questions. Questions like, why am I trading 5 days of freedom for 2? Why does school never mention taxes, credit, or ownership? Why do I know more about celebrities than I do about money? And most importantly, who profits when I stay distracted? You were trained to be poor by design. But poverty isn't just about money. It's about power, and they train you to hand yours over in exchange for convenience, validation, or safety. They want you emotionally poor, intellectually poor, strategically poor, because those forms of poverty are harder to see and easier to maintain. So what would Machiavelli advise? Start thinking like a shadow. Move silently. Learn relentlessly. Build skills they don't expect from you. Study negotiation. Study persuasion. Study systems. Not for approval, not for applause, but for leverage. Because once you understand how decisions are made, how perception is shaped, how influence is transferred, you stop being a player. You become the one writing the rules and stop announcing your goals. They trained you to overshare your plans, your intentions, your every move. They call it being open, being transparent. But really, it's how they measure your threat level. Machiavelli would say, conceal your ambition. Not because it's shameful, but because it becomes lethal in silence. People can't attack what they can't see. They can't sabotage what they don't know exists. You owe them no warning, no preface, just results. One day you're the quiet one, the nice one, the underdog, and the next you're the one they can't figure out. That's power. Now let's go deeper. If you want to truly break the system, you need to stop identifying with it. Your job is not your identity. Your productivity is not your worth. Your title is not your destiny. They trained you to wrap your ego around these things because it keeps you trapped. Because once you believe that being laid off is a personal failure, they've won. Once you see your salary as your value, they've won. Once you believe you need their permission to succeed, they've won. But here's the truth. You were never told. Your potential is not up for negotiation. It doesn't depend on their validation. It's not unlocked by degrees or endorsements. It's unlocked by awareness. The moment you realize you've been trained into limitation, that's when you start to break it. And when you do, something strange happens. The system starts to look flimsy. You see how many people are faking it. How many successful people are drowning in debt and fear and stress. You see how much of the hierarchy is built on illusion. Titles that mean nothing. Credentials that don't convert. Loud voices with no depth. And you become sharper. You start questioning the offers you once jumped at. You stop showing up to tables where you're the meal. You don't ask for a seat. You build your own. Quietly, strategically, without waiting. But be warned, they'll try to lure you back with guilt, with fear, with social pressure. You've changed. Yes, because you're supposed to. Evolution is the enemy of their control. Growth terrifies those who are still stuck. And silence, when paired with strength, is the most unforgivable sin in their book because it means you no longer need them. So don't try to convince anyone. That's just another trap. Instead, let them watch. Let your absence raise questions. Let your results speak louder than your explanations. Because when they can't label you, they can't limit you. And that's when you've truly escaped the script. And once you've escaped the script, something else starts to unfold almost invisibly at first. You begin to notice how desperate the system is to pull you back in. Suddenly, you're bombarded with voices reminding you to be realistic. Friends telling you to stop dreaming so big. Family asking, what if it doesn't work out? Not because they want you to fail, but because your rebellion threatens their sense of order. They need you to stay in your role. It keeps their world predictable. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. Stability to the masses is preferable to truth. That's why systems survive, because they offer the illusion of safety in exchange for your silence. But here's the trade-off. The longer you stay silent, the louder your regret becomes. And eventually, the life you tolerated becomes the prison you die in. The system thrives not on chains but on stories. Stories you were told since you were too young to question them. Success comes to those who wait. If you work hard, everything will pay off. Money can't buy happiness. These weren't truths. They were scripts, psychological sedatives. But here's what they never told you. The most dangerous person isn't the one with the most money or connections. It's the one who no longer believes the stories, the one who writes them. So let's rewrite. Instead of wait your turn, try create your turn. Instead of follow your passion, try build skills that give you power. Instead of be humble, try be underestimated. Because when they don't see you coming, they can't prepare. And that's how you win. They trained you to optimize for comfort. But Machiavelli would say comfort is the enemy of clarity. When you're comfortable, you stop questioning. You accept things as there. You numb the itch to escape. But clarity lives in discomfort. It's in the moment you realize you hate your routine, that you dread Mondays, that your life feels like an autoplay video you never chose. That's not a crisis, that's your signal. Listen to it and then use it. Because breaking their system doesn't require rebellion. It requires reprogramming quietly, intentionally. Begin by studying money. Not just how to make it, but how it moves, who controls it, what it responds to. Because wealth doesn't just flow to the deserving. It flows to the strategic. It avoids emotion. It avoids noise. It seeks value, power, and control. Start thinking in those terms. Stop asking, how do I make more? Start asking, how do I build systems that make for me? It could be digital. It could be skill-based. It could be distribution. It doesn't matter. What matters is ownership. You need leverage that compounds, not income that expires every Friday. And stop waiting for motivation. That's another trick they trained you with. They told you motivation is the fire. But motivation is unreliable. What you need is cold discipline. The kind that moves even when you don't feel like it. Because every time you move without permission, you're teaching your brain something radical. I don't need to feel good to move. I don't need applause to act. I don't need the world to agree before I choose myself. And now let's cut even deeper. They trained you to think in years, not moments. To defer joy. Save for retirement. Buy a house at 40. Live your dream once your hair is gray. Why? Because the longer your dream is postponed, the easier it is to replace it with consumption. They say you can't buy freedom, but they sell you everything except that. New shoes, new phones, vacations, upgrades, all distractions. None of them build sovereignty. You want to really scare the system? Build something no one can take. Skills that no algorithm can erase. Reputation so strong people seek you out. A network so intentional you never have to beg again. That's wealth. Not just in money, but in insulation, in power, in quiet control. Machiavelli would call this the invisible kingdom. The empire you build without crowns, without armies, without permission. Because the moment they know you don't need them, they start needing you. That's when the power flips. But this demands brutal honesty. You can't break the system while still craving its rewards. You can't reject obedience but still seek validation. You can't escape the maze while still bragging about how fast you run inside it. You have to want freedom more than recognition, more than comfort, more than applause. So what now? Start documenting everything they never taught you. Build your own curriculum. Study power dynamics. Read contracts, understand how influence works. Reverse engineer what top players actually do, not what they say. Because most of them speak humility and practice control. They whisper about luck and scream strategy behind closed doors. Watch their moves, not their words. And then act, not recklessly, but relentlessly. Don't just plan, execute, build the thing. Launch the page. Start the skill. Ask for the deal. Close the sale. Test the idea. Fail fast. Learn faster. Refine. Scale. Keep moving. Don't stop for praise. Don't pause for doubt, just move. Because motion is how you outrun their programming. And remember, power is not given, it's taken. Not through violence, not through chaos, but through clarity. Through precision. Through doing what most people are too scared to even try. Eventually, you'll look around and realize you're not even in the same game anymore. While others beg for raises, you're writing your own. While others debate over job titles, you're building assets. While others wait for someone to save them, you've already saved yourself. You'll know you've escaped when peace feels normal, when you're no longer triggered by the noise, when you're not desperate to prove anything because proof, and when that teaching becomes lived experience. When you've trained your instincts to reject dependency, you begin to feel something strange, like power returning to places you didn't know you lost it. Your mornings stop feeling rushed. Your energy stops leaking into obligations that don't serve you. Your words become sharper, your silence louder. Not because you're trying to impress, but because you finally understand. Control begins where desperation ends. You'll see the system for what it truly is. Not a path to success, but a set of carefully arranged illusions. Promotions dangled like carrots. Paychecks used as pacifiers. Social approval weaponized to keep you docile. All designed to keep you running, but never arriving. And once you stop chasing, once you stop needing their gold stars, their opinions, their fake offers of opportunity, you become untouchable. Not because you're invincible, but because you're no longer participating in the game they built to break you. That's the core Machiavellian lesson no one ever hands you. You don't win by fighting the system on its terms. You win by making the system irrelevant, by becoming so strategic, so self-directed that their rules become background noise. You're not rebelling. You're outgrowing quietly, permanently. And what you'll find once you've stepped out is that true wealth was never just about money. It was about choice, about having the power to say no without fear, to walk away from what drains you, to build in the shadows and emerge only when it's undeniable, to operate without seeking permission, without explaining, without diluting yourself for mass appeal. But be careful here. This new territory comes with its own traps. The most seductive of them is ego. You've escaped the script. You're moving different. You're earning, learning, growing. But now they'll try a different tactic. Praise, admiration, flattery. They'll tempt you to become the very thing you ran from, a performer in their theater, but with a fancier costume. This is where most people fall. They trade one kind of control for another. They leave the job but become slaves to applause. They build businesses but remain imprisoned by comparison. They switch cages and call it freedom. But Machiavelli would warn you if your identity depends on validation. Your enemies will own your mind. Real power is silent. It doesn't need to be seen to exist. It doesn't flinch under scrutiny. It doesn't explain its moves. It acts, calculates, and adapts. So as you rise, strip away anything performative. Every move you make it real. Make it rooted. Make it yours. Build in silence. Share only what cannot be sabotaged. Create value so undeniable the world bends to accommodate it. And while you're at it, remember that the world is full of traps disguised as opportunities. They'll offer you partnerships that dilute your vision. Mentorships that are really just disguised control. Exposure that comes at the cost of your boundaries. Smile, nod, decline. Because every yes you say out of fear takes power from your future self. Build slowly if you must, but build sovereign. Build lean. Build smart. Own everything you can. Your platform, your product, your pipeline. The moment your survival depends on someone else's gate, you've already surrendered leverage. And never stop watching. Watch how people talk when they think you're below them. Watch how they change when they realize you're not. These are signals, clues. Their reactions will tell you who to bring close and who to keep at a distance. Because one thing is certain, the more control you gain, the more they'll try to disguise their envy as advice. You must learn to hear it without absorbing it. Now let's go deeper still, beyond business, beyond money. This final layer of breaking the system is psychological. It's about mastering the one battlefield they never taught you to navigate: your own mind. They trained you to associate stillness with laziness, silence with weakness, slowness with failure. But Machiavelli knew better. He understood the power of calculated delay, the discipline of silence, the strength of observing while others act emotionally. The system is built to make you react. But when you stop reacting and start thinking, start choosing, you shift from pawn to player, and you must carry that mindset into every domain. Your relationships filter them with ruthless clarity. Who respects your time? Who drains it? Who challenges your ideas without trying to dominate you? Who pretends to support you but quietly hopes you fail? Remove the liabilities. Keep only the allies, your routines. Build rituals that anchor you in clarity, not mindless hustle, but precise intention. When you wake, what do you feed your mind? What inputs do you allow? Because garbage in means garbage out. The system thrives on distraction. You must become immune, and your goals stretch them. Make them sound reasonable. The old version of you would laugh. Not because ambition is everything, but because shrinking your vision is how they keep you manageable. The more you believe in limitation, the less likely you are to threaten their order. You've spent your life being told to think small, to be realistic, to play safe. But look at where that got you. Burned out, underpaid, overlooked. Now it's time to become dangerous. Not reckless, not loud, but dangerous in your calm. Dangerous in your clarity, dangerous in the way you no longer beg. You just build, and eventually you'll look back at the life they trained you for, and you won't even recognize it. It'll seem foreign, like an old dream that belonged to someone else, because now you've rewritten the script. You've stopped asking. You've started taking not from others, but from the potential. They told you to ignore because in the end that's all Machiavelli ever wanted you to understand. Systems don't crumble from rage. They erode under strategy. Quiet, relentless, intelligent rebellion. The kind you live, not the kind you post. Not the kind you scream, but the kind that makes you impossible to ignore and impossible to